Welcome to Education Today. I'm Brittany Melito.
And I'm Mark Kincaski.
Of Armstrong High School in the Armstrong School District. Tonight we are going to talk about a topic that has been a hot button issue now for several years. It has driven multiple safety concerns and conversations across the world, and what started at the professional sports level has filtered down into high school and elementary sports now as well. This concern is about concussions and how they are handled.
There's a lot of information out there, and the topic has driven conversations from professional executives to parents of middle school students. Tonight we have brought in a member of local and intermediate unit to discuss the importance of concussions and a program that is out there and related to the topic. Welcome to Education Today. Could you please introduce yourself for our viewers and tell us your role in the organization that you work with?
Sure. My name is Bob Trusello, and I work for the Aaron Intermediate Unit. I work as a supervisor of special education. I also do a number of trainings in various areas, including that of concussions.
What exactly is the IU, and how does the work that is done there tie into concussion topics?
Pennsylvania is divided into 29 intermediate units, and what an intermediate unit is it's an educational and a service agency that provides services to school districts and agencies within our two counties. And our intermediate unit, ARIN, A-R-I-N, the acronym, the A-R stands for Armstrong, the I-N is for Indiana. So we serve the two counties in a variety of ways.
I understand that there's a specific program that you are here to talk about tonight. Can you tell us what that is?
Absolutely. About 9 years ago, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania established a program that's referred to as Brainsteps. And as you spell Brainsteps, the S-T-E-P-S is an acronym for Strategies Teaching Educators, Parents, and Students. At that time, the realization in Pennsylvania was that we have a lot of young people, like yourselves, who've suffered brain injury of a variety of types. And concussions are one mode of brain injury. And I'm the team leader for the Intermediate Unit 28 Brainsteps team.
How does this program tie into the public school sector?
That's probably the best question you could have asked me. To explain that, I have these two cans of Coca-Cola, and they're identical. Neither are open, look exactly the same. No matter which position I hold them in, they're same. But if I take one and I shake it vehemently, they still look the same. That's the issue with concussions. This could represent a concussed student, a non-concussed student. So if you have, for example, a football player, a basketball player who's broken his or her leg playing the sport, they're walking down the hall, they have crutches on, they have a cast on, they have a cast on their arm, a patch over their eye, whatever the injury requires. A concussed student, regardless of how they had the concussion, doesn't look different. Kind of like the two cans of Coca-Cola. I could play the old shell game with you and turn them around and you would know which was different. So Brainsteps, the program Brainsteps, was initiated by the Pennsylvania Department of Education and Department of Health to help students who've suffered brain injuries of any variety get back into school, be successful into school. And to be clear, a concussion is a brain injury.
When and why did this program get its start?
The program itself is 9 years old. Our intermediate unit 28, which I described to you, kind of missed out on the first year. So we've been in place for 8 years. Our goal is to help school districts within the two counties, Armstrong and Indiana County, work with students who've been concussed, who have had brain injury of any variety, to get them into school, to be successful in school, to keep them in school. We also work directly with families, to work with educators. I've had multiple trainings in your school district with faculty, with parents, with coaches regarding the issue of brain injury. So we hope to make the students who are invisible, like the can of Coke that's been shaken, stay successful in schools.
What services does the Brainsteps program provide?
The Brainsteps program provides multiple services. We train parents, we train educators, we train staffs, and probably I guess the most significant program that we offer is one that your district has taken advantage of, and it's referred to as concussion management teams. Every district can have a team trained right into district level. And this very building where we're speaking today has several teams that address concussed students. So they have several members of the team. They have one member who looks at symptoms. So if you're the concussed student, the person on the team might meet with you and ask you certain questions. Are you dizzy? Do you have headaches? What times of day are they? Another person on this concussion management team would actually look at the classroom environment. Is it a certain time of the day your headaches occur? Is it because of bright lights, no lights? Is it a noisy environment? So if I would look at all the services provided by Brainsteps, I think the one that has reached out the furthest was the inception of concussion management teams.
Obviously, the health of our students is of the utmost importance. On average, how many students suffer from concussions?
Actually, I just looked at that number this morning. Last year, there were over 40,000 students in Pennsylvania who suffered concussions. That number could never be exact because not all concussions are reported. And actually, not all concussions, not all students are made aware of the fact they have a concussion. Yesterday afternoon, I met with a young man in a school district not far from here. He's been multiply concussed. He suffered 4 concussions, 2 when he was living in California, 2 in Pennsylvania. And in the case of the first 2 concussions, he said to me, he says, "Mr. Trusello, I didn't know I had a concussion. I knew I was hit, but I didn't know I had a concussion. I knew my head hurt." So that number of 40,000, we don't know that it's exact. Another thing that makes that number less exact is the effects of concussions look like a lot of other things. An example I could give you is if you had a little girl in 1st grade in one of your elementary schools here in the district who was out back in the playground and fell off the monkey bars and she hit her head. And she cried and she rubbed her head, but no one knew she hit her head. Seemed like she was okay. A year or so later, something changes in her speech pattern. So someone in school with a parent says, "I think my daughter has an issue with speech. Can you evaluate her?" So your special education department evaluates her. Sure enough, she now becomes a student with a speech and language impairment. She sees the speech clinician twice a week to work on her CHs and THs and vowels. A couple years later, she starts to fall behind on her studies. We reevaluate her again. Now she's a student with a specific learning disability, speech and language disorder. A few years later, she starts to have behavioral issues. Now we reevaluate her. She's a student with specific learning disability, emotional disturbance, speech and language disorder. No, she's not. She's a child who's been concussed, has not recovered. She has a traumatic brain injury. So the number, when I say 40,000, those are the ones we know about.
What kind of effects will a concussion have on a student?
Some of the more immediate effects that it will have on a student, I'll kind of speak about immediate first. The typical effects that you would have, and if you go on the internet and you search concussions, you'll see nausea. Person gets nauseous. Dizziness. They become apathetic. It seems like they don't care for a while. The young man I was talking to yesterday talked about losing his balance. Some of the more, not quite immediate, but semi-immediate effects would be changes in sleep patterns. And the 2 most common are, it's kind of like the candy, M&M. It's changes in mood and changes in memory. And there's almost always a change in mood and a change in memory. What makes it more difficult to pinpoint is not all of those effects occur right after the concussion. So hypothetically, if you fall on the steps and you're concussed December 3rd today, you fall on the steps, you're concussed, 3 months from now, your moods start to change. Someone at home notices you become more angry, you speak out more, you start to forget things. The boy that I spoke with yesterday, his most recent concussion was 4 weeks ago. He said to me, he says, "Just yesterday," he said, "I walked down the stairs into the kitchen to make myself something to eat. I suddenly forgot why I was there." And now we're starting to see some of the most recent research deals with sleep disorders. And one of the reasons for that is we think of our eyes, we think our eyes serve to see. Well, they do, but they also serve to take in light, which regulates the chemical levels in our brain, the melatonin levels. So if you've been shaken, even if you're hit from behind and you're in a car and you have a whiplash, your head's never been hit, but your brain rotates, you have a concussion, that alters the amount of light that comes in. So mood, memory, sleep, long term. Some of the more tragic results from concussions that we worry about if they aren't treated properly are depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations, criminal tendencies. You can kind of mirror image it to post-traumatic stress disorder. We hear so much of that about veterans returning from war. So when we worry about the long-term effect with young people like yourselves, those are some of the things that come to mind immediately.
What are Brainstep teams and who is made up of these?
There are 29 Brainsteps teams in Pennsylvania. There might actually be a couple more been added recently. The Brainsteps team is kind of like the court of last resort, and I'll explain what I mean. If a student in your school here is concussed, is reported to your concussion management team here in your high school, and they work with that student for 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks, there's still symptoms, there's still questions that are unanswered. They say we need to go to the next level. That's what they would call our Brainsteps team. Our Brainsteps team is very diverse. My background is special education. I'm on the Brainsteps team, I'm the chairperson. We also have a vision specialist on our Brainsteps team. And the reason for that is about 50% of people who suffer concussions have some level of vision issue at some time in their life. It could be blurred vision, it could be double vision, it could be headaches from bright lights, any of that. We also have another special ed director from one of our school districts. We have a speech and language clinician because about 30% of young people who suffer concussions have some kind of speech and language disorder. We have a representative from the Indiana County Technology Center on our team, because what we've discovered, and we kind of discovered it by accident, is at a technology site where there's a lot of mechanical, physical things going on. There's sights, there's sounds, there's smells that make the situation of a concussed student worse. We discovered that the smell of hair dye in a cosmetology program at the Technology Center was almost reconcussing the student. We also have, and it's kind of interesting, we have the chair of the special ed department from a local university on our team. And one of the reasons for that is we try to carry the message to people who are going to go out and work in schools, who are going to be teachers. Last but not least, probably the most important member on our team is a parent member. And the reason we have a parent member is if one of you young people were concussed, we have our parent member call your parent and kind of talk them through the steps. I've been there before, this is what I've done. So that's the composition of our team. Teams vary across the state.
How are school districts trained in regards to concussions?
The concussion management training actually is web-based. When one of your guidance counselors called me a couple of years ago and said, we would like to get a concussion management team trained, I directed her to the Brainsteps website, which is brainsteps.net. Right on the homepage of brainsteps.net, there's concussion management training. So any member of the school district, any faculty member that wants to be trained can go online. It's about a 3 or 3.5 hour training. They get information on symptoms to track, accommodations for the students. For example, yesterday the student that I met with, now he's been concussed 4 times in 3 years. The accommodations that we came up with were, and this is their concussion management team worked with me on this, his tests are to be chunked. What I mean by chunked is he'll take a test over multiple days, because when you're concussed, your processing is slowed down. It's almost like you have a Pentium 5, but it's working like a Pentium 3. He's also given the notes for his class ahead of time. And he chose this. He said, I don't want the full array of notes. I would like you to leave a few words out, because as I'm listening to instruction or copying instruction off the board, when I look up and I look down, I look up and I look down, I get confused because the brain has to refocus.
How is the program implemented in our district?
Your district, and I don't get a paycheck from the Armstrong School District, so this is not a pat on the back for the Armstrong School District, but your district is probably eons ahead of most districts. You have a concussion management team that actually has information from the doctors. They have 2 separate protocols, and I sat in on a meeting a few weeks ago with your team here at Armstrong Junior Senior High. They look at what the teachers are saying about the student, and then they look at what the student's saying about the student. With those 2 pieces of information, they put in place a plan. And again, we may not know, or your team may not know, of all the concussed students, because not all concussions are reported. Teams are very active, they meet on a regular basis. I believe yours meets every 2 weeks, but I'm not positive about that, because that varies in districts.
Okay, thanks very much. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back with Armstrong School District's Education Today.
The brain is a remarkable organ. It's almost infinite in its capacity. Its ability to reach its full potential is limited by only one thing: the heart. For if the heart isn't fully engaged in what you're doing, if you have no drive, no passion, the brain will simply go through the motions. Find your success at Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Welcome back to Armstrong School District's Education Today. Tonight we are talking with Mr. Robert Tisello, who is part of the WIUP-TV team located in Indiana, PA. Brainsteps is a comprehensive program. Where can teachers find information, and what should they be on lookout for in their classes?
Actually, I would say there are two good sources. One would be to connect with your concussion management team here in your district, and I believe each of your buildings has an active team. An easy access would be to go to the website brainsteps.net. And if you go to brainsteps.net, you don't have to log in as a team member. It would take a Brainsteps team member, such as myself, to log in and get more deeply into the site. But teachers can look at classroom resources for kids who've been concussed, basic symptoms for students who've been concussed. There's a myriad of information right on the home page of that website. That's also where you can find a link to concussion management training. So should teachers in your district or guidance counselors, administrators want to become part of that team, that's also on that home page. Another really good place to look, probably the mother lode for information on concussions, is the Centers for Disease Control website, cdc.gov. That's an excellent source. And actually, to answer your question a little bit more completely, there are free resources there. So if you go to cdc.gov and you see information on concussions or brain injury in general, you can either use the website to order, or you can order by phone. I'll give you a hint. If you order by phone, you can get more, and you can get more there's no charge, and they actually pay for postage. So 95% of what we've learned about concussions, we've learned in the last 10 years, which my first concussion occurred 50 years ago. I was a teenager playing baseball, hit my head in a game, was knocked out briefly, was never taken out of the game. So in the last 10 years, we've learned so much about concussions. And it's kind of like a book that's still being written because we don't know everything yet.
The Brainsteps website has many resources. Can you tell us what information that site holds?
Sure. I just mentioned that, actually I have a copy of the homepage here. A couple of things that I would call your particular attention to would be brain injury resources for teacher and brain injury classroom resources. There's also a listing of upcoming Brainsteps trainings, and the trainings are all saved to the website. So I think those would be the three areas that I would look at most directly.
The website has an area where educators can prepare and train for working with students with brain injuries. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's the one we talked about. It's right there on the website. It's the Return to Learn Concussion Management Team. It's interesting. A couple of years ago, Pennsylvania passed legislation that was Return to Play. It's called the Safety and Youth Sports Act. And what that did was that governs all the schools in Pennsylvania that are covered by the PIAA. And it says that any concussed athlete or athlete who's suspected of a concussion can't return to play unless they're cleared by a medical professional who is schooled and trained in concussion management, which means you can't just go to the family doctor in the corner who says, take 2 aspirins and call me in the morning. So that's return to play. But there are no return to learn guidelines. So the advantage of getting your teams trained in concussion management, this helps your district teams learn when it's safe to return the student to learn full-time. And what I mean by full-time is, I'll use an example of a student in this district that we worked with a couple of years ago. Actually, one of your coordinators of special services, Dr. Michael Glue, and I worked with this student. It was a 5th grade student who was concussed in I think it was a youth football incident, although it could have been baseball. We received the information from the medical facility, which was UPMC Concussion Management in Pittsburgh, which is the #1 concussion management center in the world. In there it said partial days. So we had to explore what partial days meant. And the mother was part of our team, and she said early mornings and late afternoons seemed to be the worst for him. So we did not give this student a half-day morning or half-day afternoon. We actually began his school day at 9:45, and we ended his school day at 1:30. So as we got ensuing information from the doctors showing progression of the student, we started to expand the school day at each end, until at the end of the school year, he was back to going to school full day. So those are some of the things that we learned because of the information we now have that we didn't have before.
Can you tell us about the trainings that the program has? Is it only at certain locations, or can a district schedule one at their buildings?
I sometimes kid the administrators in your district, specifically Dr. Glue. I tell him that I should get a paycheck from the Armstrong School District because your district has just done so well in the area of trainings. We come to your district. We offer trainings in your district. They're free of charge because it's funded by the Department of Education, Department of Health. So there's no charge to your district. We've trained paraeducators, teacher aides. We've trained teachers. We've trained parents. We've trained coaches. A variety of trainings. There's actually a training specific to concussion. There's one specific to concussion in youth sports. There's one that's more global. It's about brain injury in general, because really concussion is just one type of brain injury. Concussion is a traumatic brain injury where an outside physical force does something to your head. But there's also non-traumatic brain injury, brain tumors, encephalitis, meningitis, inhalation of substances. So anyone who wants the training can just contact our Brainsteps team at IU28, get on our website. There's a Brainsteps link. Click on Brainsteps that has my name, my phone number. Explain to me who wants trained, where the training is. Actually, we just did training for a youth basketball league that was from Rural Valley. And your district was good enough to let us use the West Shamokin High School auditorium to train the parents and the coaches. And the league isn't even associated with your school district. So I commend your district for that. But trainings can be held anywhere.
What responsibility does the school district have in regard to concussion protocols, and what must they do?
What must they do and what should they do are probably two different questions. If McDonald's can get sued because the coffee's too hot, I think school districts need to be very aware of the fact that when they have reasonable thought that a student is concussed, they need to move into action with their concussion management team. And that would be to look at the symptoms in school, get information from the doctor, information from the student, put it together and make it a workable plan. Such as the plan I spoke of yesterday for the young man in a different district where we decided upon the accommodations he needs. Actually, what scares me are the concussions that are non-diagnosed. And years later, the symptoms don't have to occur right away. You know, I've spoken to teachers who said they were concussed 15 years ago, and just lately they're starting to see changes in their moods and the way they respond. So I think it's what should they do, what can they do are kind of two different questions, but you can put it together, and the incorrect answer would be to do nothing.
Stepping away from the program for a minute, at what point did this become such an issue in society?
The term I use is, we learned about concussions upside down. And what I mean by that is, if we think about our most vulnerable people, they're very young children. But we didn't learn about concussions with young children. I think if the NFL and the NHL had not sued the multi-billion-dollar lawsuits against the leagues, I don't think we would be doing what we're doing today. You know, we learned about it upside down. There have been athletes, and I won't mention names on camera, but some of them are well publicized, football players, hockey players, who had taken their own lives. And when they took their lives in a manner in which the brain wasn't damaged. And they left notes indicating that after my passing, I would like you to study my brain because something's going on. I've lost control of my moods. I've lost control of my memory. I become argumentative. I become violent. I become depressed. I become anxious. And I honestly believe, and this is just an opinion, that if that had not occurred, we wouldn't be looking at this. Some of the Pittsburgh Steelers who had passed away through suicides or other means, where their brains were studied after their death, and they were diagnosed with a condition called CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And what that is upon repeated hits to my head, eventually the front part of my brain, which controls my moods and my mood mechanisms, is basically dissolved. But the unfortunate thing is that can't be diagnosed until after death. So if that hadn't happened at the top level, it kind of trickled down. I wish it would have happened the other way. It would have started by studying children and their concussions and brain injuries, but because of all the national attention to this, I think that's why we're where we are today.
If not taken seriously, what can the ramifications of being concussed be?
Starting immediately, if not taken seriously, you start to see changes in yourself. There's a certain athlete, again, I won't mention a particular name, who plays for a professional team not far from here. After his second concussion, he was unable to look in the mirror for 6 months to comb his hair, because in looking in the mirror, the reflection he got made him so dizzy. That's when he realized something seriously is wrong. So he sat out for a year. Now that was with treatment. He's returned, and it appears that everything's okay. untreated, that's where they begin to talk about anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, suicides. I serve on the suicide task force for Indiana County, and I can't get into all the confidential information that passes in our meetings, but we have reason to believe that many of the suicidal ideations or suicide attempts occur because of brain trauma. I think that's probably the best answer for you.
What should parents be on the lookout for, and how should they handle their kids should they suffer or appear to suffer a concussion?
As a parent, as a grandparent, as an educator, as a consultant, I can say if any parent watching this or any parent who gets the word that's spread from this telecast thinks that their child has been concussed, they need to get him or her to a medical professional who understands concussions, even if they haven't been concussed, because it's better to have the support and not need it than need it and not have it. That would be my first response. The second thing they should do would be to get that information to the school district. When a student from your school district is referred to the Brainsteps team, we have the parent sign a release of information. So myself or another member of our team has the autonomy to talk to somebody at your district, to talk to the parent, to talk to the medical professional, so we can put together a plan that supports them. There's an excellent series of videos on the AHRN website. If any of the viewers go to www.IU28.org, and over on the right side, there's a link. It says it's referred to as AHRN Play. If you click on that and type in "Save Your Brain," there's the story of local people, local young people who've been concussed, and none of them were athletic concussions. So I think that would be a really good education piece.
For anyone who would like to get more information, where should they look to go for good resources?
Some of the best resources locally can be found at your local hospital. I've been told that the hospital here in Katanning is initiating a concussion management program. Parents or caregivers or interested parties can also get on the AHRN website, the one I referenced before, IU28.org. There's a Brainsteps link there which takes you right to information on Brainsteps. CDC.gov is also an excellent resource. Another good resource is the Brain Injury Association of Pennsylvania website. Those would be the best resources. And in searching a medical professional for your child who's been concussed or you suspect they've been concussed, be certain that the person that you're going to has information on concussions and works directly with brain injury. They're now looking at alternative and augmentative therapies for people who've been concussed. It's not just rest. Vision therapy goes on, vestibular therapy to help with balance, because oftentimes when we're concussed, our eyes aren't working in conjunction with each other. So vision therapy can help correct that.
Is there anything you'd like to add for the benefit of our viewers?
If you have any questions about concussions or brain injury to any degree, please feel free to contact me. My name is associated with the Brainsteps link on the AHRN website, IU28.org. I thank you for your time. I really appreciated the opportunity to share this information.
Well, that's our show for today. I'd like to thank our guest, Mr. Robert Trusello of the AHRN IU28, for taking time to join us tonight. Our thanks also go out to the TV production students of Armstrong High School, led by their teacher, Mr. Josh Miklos. They were our film crew today.
Please join us again next week for another look at the Armstrong School District. DVD copies of this and all Education Today programming can be requested by contacting Chris Garatano, multimedia technician at Armstrong Junior Senior High School. Visit our website for updated information about the district, and have a great week.